Tonight, the president under pressure, and the number one issue for Americans still a point of contention.
Last time we spoke, you told me you were expecting 4% growth in the second half of the year, but it was way lower.
How will the economy impact the midterms? Plus, case dropped. A former Olympian is off the hook after the government admits the reflecting pool renovation was a rush job. Also, put it in writing.
It's dead, but, I wish it weren't, to be honest with you.
Trump makes the case for his anti-weaponization fund, but two Republican holdouts in the Senate aren't backing down. And the president's exasperation with Iran on full display.
All they do is make me angry.
But then goes against his own FBI on Iran's role in the Minnesota cyber attack.
I blame it on Minnesota because they're grossly incompetent.
Live from the Food Network, Jemele Hill, Tim Parrish, Amisha Cross, and Tim Pawlenty for a special Summer Fridays edition of Newsnight. Good evening, I'm Abby Phillip with the Field Trip edition of Newsnight. Now, as you know, we spend our Fridays here at the Food Network Test Kitchen in New York. They're our sister company. So we have a fabulous chef serving our friends of the show. She's got some special treats for us at the end of the night as well. But first, as always, the news. A disastrous week for Donald Trump, an indictment of his agenda, and there are many signs that things are not getting much better for him. Just this week, Trump's pick to be the next attorney general was put on hold, torpedoed by members of his own party. Senators John Cornyn and Thom Tillis are demanding limits on his tax immunity deal and a written guarantee that his slush fund for allies is officially and truly dead. A new CNN poll finds that 2/3 of Americans disapprove of Trump, matching his career low, which followed the Capitol riot. Voters are also demanding change in Congress, indicating that they're willing to give Democrats a chance in November, and by a significant margin. The war in Iran, of course, continues, but the dissent is only growing, even within MAGA. And on the economy, Trump's signature issue, surveys say that the president is underwater. Pressed by CNN's Pam Brown about these dire poll numbers, Trump's top economic advisor appeared to doubt whether Americans actually feel that way.
Is this the, quote, amazing economy the administration thought you'd all be boasting about when the, quote, unquote, big, beautiful bill was passed more than a year ago?
Well, again, right now, the economy does look amazing to me. The inflation's going down. The unemployment rate is low. Initial claims like almost no one's getting fired. And final demand was up about 4%.
What do you say to that person who's part of that group, that 66%, who say Trump has actually made the economic conditions are worse?
I just don't believe a poll like that, given how strong the numbers are and how strong income growth is, how optimistic people are.
Now, before we open it up to the table here, we invite you at home to join the debate. Head to cnn.com/Abby, weigh in there, and we'll get to some of your comments as we go throughout the show. The president is, it seems, in denial about the reality of the situation that he is facing on a number of different fronts, but in particular, the economic circumstances that we face are something that seems kind of far from his mind, and you heard that today when he was talking to his cabinet.
No, absolutely. And it was purposeful. This is a president who denies that affordability concerns actually exist. This is a president who, when given the opportunity to actually lean in on the topic of affordability, to talk to people about the price of groceries, to talk to people about the price of gas, to talk to people about the price of housing. This is also a president who pushed back against a bipartisan bill that would have made housing more affordable. He simply doesn't care. And he's told the American public that not once, not twice, but now 3 times. He has promoted rations for people to feed their children. He is somebody who, as recently as 2 days ago, RFK Jr., one of his appointees, told people to buy liver because liver is cheaper. This is a guy who does not care about the everyday concerns of the American people. And he doesn't want to have this economic conversation because he ran in 2016 on the economy. The economy sealed for him up until the pandemic, and he believed that he could still continue around, having that conversation and still be the heir apparent of a strong economy, even though his tariff policy, in all honesty, drove up a lot of prices as well.
At this cabinet meeting, which was at Camp David today, it was the usual around the world of praise for Donald Trump in the room. But here is Scott Bessent talking about how he sees the economy as well.
I think if we look back, whether our founders was President Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, could not have imagined the economy that we would have created. It is the envy of the world. We've never seen anything like it, and we're pulling away from the rest of the world because of your leadership.
Now, if we are pulling away, it's actually for the wrong reasons, Governor Pawlenty. Look at this. We are at 3.5% of inflation. That is the highest of all the G7 countries. Inflation is going in the wrong direction. And there's really rarely an acknowledgement of that by this administration. They talk about the highs of inflation under Biden, which were really, really bad, for sure. But when Trump came into office, inflation was at 3%. Now we're at 3.5%. Wrong direction.
Well, the Federal Reserve wants the inflation to be 2%, and it's 3%, so it is too high. And I think anybody looking at it can acknowledge that part. We can also look at some other things, though, to say that it's, to be fair, jobless claims are low. Unemployment is, by historical measures, is pretty low. And we have a situation where the stock market is high, inflation is high, and there's some other negatives in the economy as well. But I think the fair reading of what's going on is it's a mix. But the real key thing is the people, the voters, don't feel it's mixed. They feel it's concerning and it's challenging. And so that's the thing that politicians have to keep an eye on between now and November, obviously, and what they can do about it in policy.
Now, we also have to acknowledge that a lot of times, because some of us are stuck in the past, you're looking at what gas was in 1985 and wanting it to be the same. So there's always going to be a little bit of a disconnect. But I think this is something worse, because a lot of the reason the economy is in the situation it is because of self-inflicted wounds by the president. Nobody told him to do all of this with tariffs to increase what households are paying for goods, to make it tougher on businesses when it comes to circulating dollars in our economy. And so that's what people see. Beyond all that, they're making a mistake, actually, the Democrats made in the last administration. Inflation was getting high. People could see that the economy was not working for everybody. And every time you tried to confront Democrats with this, they said, but the stock market. Now Republicans are literally doing the same thing, making the same mistakes. And when people are looking at this administration and they're seeing all this money toward renovations and pools and all this other dumb stuff that people don't care about, they get upset. They don't want their money being spent that way. They look at the money being spent in Iran. They look at the money, the blank check being written and given to Israel, and it makes people angrier. And so because they refuse to acknowledge what these concerns are, it's only making people mad, and they're going to show that anger at the voting box when it comes to the midterms.
Yeah, Abby, I think there's definitely a disconnect. And Governor, I think that you point out aptly the wins that this administration has had in the economy. You also pointed out very effectively that they're not connecting those wins to the American people. When families are sitting around their dinner table and they're talking about how expensive things are, the administration is sitting, around a table at Camp David, and they're telling each other how well they're doing, but they really have to go take those wins out to the American public and say all the things that you just said, Governor, and lay out what those wins are, because the American people aren't feeling it. That's why you see these polls that are reflected that way. And there are a lot of distractions. I agree with you. As someone who lives in the D.C. area, when I see another gold thing go up, I'm like, man, why are we doing another gold something when the American people...
Poverty isn't a feeling, just a level set. If you can't pay your rent, you don't feel that you can't pay your rent. You can't pay your rent. If you can't feed your children, the food that you have bought does not last to the end of the week. That's not a feeling. We have to get beyond the emotional aspect of it and understand that, people are experiencing real hardship. And I think I take umbrage with the term feeling in these conversations, in large part as somebody who grew up on food stamps, who had a mom who did everything she could to put food on the table for 4 kids. We never felt a certain way. We knew what we had and we knew what we didn't have. And families right now are making those same very tough decisions. And you have way too many people in this White House who refuse to acknowledge that and, moreover, refuse to help.
It's a really important point because it does get boiled down to just, they're feeling something, but it's actually not true, which is not the case. I mean, people are actually experiencing the inability to pay their bills. And a viewer comment just came in kind of to this point. The macroeconomy could have positive signs, but politicians need to realize that the microeconomy is what the American people care about. It is their economy in their households that they care about. And even if you let's say you do want to zoom out to the macroeconomy. Fareed Zakaria, our colleague here, had an op-ed in the Washington Post about even Trump's case for tariffs, which was supposed to be about manufacturing jobs and bringing those back. He says the economic case against tariffs is stronger by the day as the numbers roll in. Spending on manufacturing construction, which surged under Joe Biden and peaked at about $250 billion at an annual rate in September of 24, fell to $175 billion by May of this year. Manufacturing employment is down 75,000 jobs since Trump returned to office. Factory output has risen, but those gains are concentrated in the advanced manufacturing and in artificial intelligence, which reflects investments planned before Trump took office. So I actually think the American people, they're experiencing that. They're experiencing a consumer economy in which wealthy people are driving the spending and making the numbers look good in the macro, but in the micro, they're making choices.
Yep.
They have payoffs or trade-offs that they have to make every single day. And when Trump goes out and says, actually things are great, and his cabinet goes out and says, actually things are great, let me tell you why, that is going to fall on deaf ears.
But it's not just saying that the economy is great. Remember, to what you brought up earlier, he told people they're just going to have to suffer for a little bit. People don't want to hear that, and you can't really build a case that you're doing great around 401ks, around stock prices, because a lot of people don't own stock. They can't eat stock. And so that doesn't mean anything to them at all.
They can't touch their retirement dollars.
No,
it means nothing to them.
And especially when you have an entire generation that is right now locked out of being able to afford a home. And those are the things that people really care about. So all of this other things about the macro and how that's working, like, when it boils down to it, if I go to the grocery store and I notice that my grocery bill is twice as big as it was last year, that's what I care about. I don't care about a 401k.
The thing about inflation, Abby, is this. Once you raise it, like they did under the Biden administration, to 7, 8, 9%, the whole base goes up. Right. So even though subsequently it might have been a 2 or 3% increase, it's up on a much higher base. So when you look at what does a pound of hamburger cost? What does a gallon of milk cost? It's not just that it's 3% more this year. That's on top of the cumulative 6, 7, 8, or 9% inflation increases that we've had not too long ago. So the whole base adjusted upward, and that's part of the reason why people are feeling this pinch in their family budgets. And I agree totally. It's not about the macro. It's about how does my family feel? How do I feel about buying groceries, putting it on the table, paying for gas, and the like?
So, Jemele, you alluded to this. The CNN poll shows 64% believe that Trump has gone too far in pursuing his personal business interests while serving as president. It seems like the chickens are coming home to roost on some of this stuff. He may not care that people don't like that they see him getting richer in office, but that is actually one of the factors that's driving his approval rating down. And I don't know that it helps Republicans to have this perception that people in power are enriching themselves at the expense of everyday Americans.
Yeah, but when did the president say he didn't care about?
Well, he said in a New York Times, no, that's not what I said. I said he doesn't care that there's a perception that he's enriching himself in the office. He said so explicitly. There was a New York Times interview in which they asked him about why he's allowing his family to pursue these deals. He said, well, I realized that people don't really care, so I've let them do it.
Right, I think you're probably mischaracterizing that the president didn't say that he doesn't care about the perception of the American people in that regard.
So then why is he doing it?
But I would say this, and we've addressed this time and time again with the president and his children and families. His children are adults that are business people that can go and do their own ventures. They can go and build and run businesses. And so I don't understand why every time one of the president's children goes and does something
because
in a business venture, we act as if
because they're interacting with
it's not.
The problem is
do it in the last administration.
The problem, Tim, is that they're interacting with the government.
Right.
They're engaging in businesses that have business before the government, getting government contracts for their investments. It's not just, they're out doing business deals on random things. They're doing business deals that have a direct relationship with the United States government, which is run by their father. That's an obvious problem.
The double standard in this story, it's atrocious how this double standard is being applied. First of all, just because, again, I'm going to stand on the point that the president's children can go run successful businesses and they shouldn't be held to account because they're running a business because their father's the president of the United States. But we saw in the last administration, family members of the Biden group, they were doing
I actually
all
think
sorts
that
of
double
things.
standard is your problem because if you had a problem with,
I wish I could finish.
If you had a problem with Hunter Biden, you should
it
have.
wasn't just Hunter
you
Biden.
should
It
have
was Hunter.
10,
it was the brother.
Sure,
it was
sure.
The whole lineup.
If you have a
of the family
problem with that,
had
you
issues
should
with
have 10 times the problems with what's going on with the Trump administration. But let's just take his kids out of it. Let's take his kids out of it. The president himself, okay, was selling meme coins and making $600 million off of the sale of cryptocurrency meme coins while in office that he advertised right when he was coming into the office. So you can take the kids out of it, but there's wealth being made off of the office right now by the president himself.
In addition to the stock trades, right? The president basically is acting like his own personal swap meet.
Abby, I'm not familiar with the story about
look, the question was about whether voters care, and I guess what I'm saying is the poll shows they do care. You may not care, but voters care.
Well, I also, just like I don't think the president said that, I never said that I didn't care either.
Oh, so do you care?
Of course I care.
Okay,
of
great.
Course I
Well,
care.
then we're clear then.
Perfect.
All right. Next for us, the DOJ is dropping its charges against the former Olympian that they accused of damaging the reflecting pool. Now, as it turns out, the real culprit was a shoddy, rushed construction. And the president justifies the so-called weaponization fund, even while he admits that it's dead. But that doesn't convince the Republicans who are holding up Todd Blanche's nomination.